I have some of my guests right here in the studio. I've got Richard Ahiagbah, who is Director of Communications of the New Patriotic Party, and Alexander Percival Segbefia, who is NDC Director of International Relations and former Minister of Health. Let's hear from you briefly about what is going on the streets of Accra, and then we can proceed to go to the statement that the president had to, give to the country. So, Richard, must be a very difficult time for the party in government and also for the government, right?
Well, thank you very much, Samson. I think that democracy is a blessing, and in moments like this, you cannot help but appreciate what opportunity we had in this Fourth Republic to allow for free expression and to ensure that the security system of our country allows and supports the rights of every Ghanaian to have that expression. I think that it's good to see my brother Martin.
Maybe we should say facilitates rather than allows, because allows could mean, permission.
Support.
When this is a constitutionally guaranteed.
Very well. Well, yeah, so I'm saying that from a background where hitherto you won't have that situation.
That's right.
And so, yes, so that facilitation is key, and to ensure that people can go and make their voices heard and be part of our democratic process. So that is acceptable. But on the other hand is the substance of why they're on the street. And I think when you asked the question earlier, it was said to not be a question of value judgment, that you shouldn't worry really about the validity of the reason, that there shouldn't be any moral value placed on it. I think that it should be about that. There must be cause, because the fact that there's free expression doesn't mean that you just take to the street just because you want to. There must be a basis for that. And I look, and when you read the Constitution, on the face of it, I don't see any basis. I think he was referring to 69(1) II. I don't think there is any incident in this country that allows for any expression of the people on the street to be justified on that basis. So the only basis, in my view, that perhaps the demonstrators have this morning to be on the street is democratic. But in terms of substantive issue, to say that government or president has done anything incidental to cause them to be on the street, I don't see it. And I think that we can get into the specifics. I've been spending time looking through the journey that this government, led by Nana Akufo-Addo, has taken Ghana through from 2017 up until now. And you can't find one single basis for the behavior. Certainly, in these times, Ghana is going through hardship. And that hardship can be explained, it can be rationalized. The president spoke about it, and the data shows exactly that there are incidental issues that are beyond our control that is forcing the situation on us. And I think that the larger conversation we're going to have will give space for evidence to be submitted that explains the situation, which is not equal to neglecting or abdicating responsibility on the part of government to say that because of the global situation, we don't take responsibility. But if we are explaining the responsibility that must be taken in the context of the global happenings. And I think that when the issues are contextualized and properly assessed, you come to see that the government has taken appropriate measures to ensure that even where we are is actually not as bad given the measures that has been taken. But we need to be clear in saying that the difficulties are real, but that does not give justification for the call.
But there are those who insist, for example, that if you take Article 69, when you're referring to Clause 1, II, that there is threat to the economy of this country. The president says we are in crisis. And he says when he says so, he's not joking with it.
Yeah.
He's not exaggerating it. And then the questions of national security threat, hunger could be one of such.
Yeah.
You say there's no basis constitutionally. They say this is where we want to look at. That's what Kofi Bentil was referring to.
Yeah, so I'm saying that, well, see, all of these things will all have to defer to the evidence, right? So what is the evidence? The material experience of people, that is one. But then you look at the efforts that is measurable in economic data to say that...
Or rather, what is the cause?
Well, the cause, yes, the cause is one thing, which I say that you can explain in global context. Now, once you move away and you come home, the measures that are being taken can also be assessed, right? But you have a larger umbrella cause of the issue that can be assessed. And so the difficulty for me is to say that because we are in a situation which government is doing something about a situation, we neglect all of the measures that are being taken. Now, we can question the validity of the measures, whether or not they are able to solve the problem or not. We can debate that. But to say that because the problem hasn't been solved yet, wherein we see that something is being done, but because the problem is not solved, we will agitate and ask for his removal. So now you are getting into an unsustainable situation where you bring something in as the president, and in 2 days, if he doesn't finish, then he must go, as though that there's a magic wand to be waved. That is almost the
when they make the argument that the professors of economics have told us that there were certain steps that ought to have been taken earlier in time, and the signs were all there on the wall, but this government simply, just didn't take the right actions. How about other countries where finance ministers have decided to resign, even though they cannot say that I am personally responsible for anything, where even presidents have resigned, not because the constitution commands them to resign, because they have not been able to manage the economy well?
But you see, there's a case where you want to look at, perhaps we're looking again at UK situation where the Chancellor of the Exchequer resigns because there are challenges. But when you come to Ghana, you can't make the same argument, because the two markets we're talking about, one is almost perfect and the other is imperfect, right? So that your policy intervention, the pass-through, the probability of your policy implement to take hold in our imperfect market compared to that perfect market is totally different. So the economic prescriptions that you have heard from economic professors and the rest of them, they are making those prescriptions as though that Ghana's market is perfect. Because right now, I think we'll go into that matter fairly shortly. The government is, in the president's speech, talks about assuring or trying to tackle cost of living expense, cost of living problems. That essentially tells you the implementation of contractional policy to deal with inflation and the rest of those. But in this country, the inflation situation we are faced with is not demand-driven, it's cost-driven, which is global in nature, right? So your policy tools, the interventions you are making, because the market is imperfect, it is difficult for you to get the outcomes that you're saying. So in other words, you are implementing a policy which by design should give you an outcome of A. But when you implement that policy in Ghana, you don't get that outcome because of the nature of the market. This same policy, Samson, the United States is implementing the same policy. All right? They are tightening their monetary policy, increasing their prime rate. But when they did that, you saw capital flight to them because the market is almost perfect. The response you are looking for, you will get because people will be drawn to the high interest to be able to store their value in your money.
He said he wanted to explain to, quote, in a language that every market woman and indeed every trader in our country understands. And he says, let me say that the basic problem we face is that we are not making as much money as we need to spend. And what little money we do make is going to pay for debts we have contracted to fund development projects we must. Some of the analysts that we speak about who have been on this show over a period, some have taken a view that exactly the point. And that's why when the president says he must take personal responsibility to a large extent. You begin your administration by spending 25 billion Ghana cedis for bank collapse issues. You don't have that money. You are told that what the banks needed to survive, perhaps, would have been some 8, 9 billion. So you don't have 25 billion. You spent it. So that's debt you need to pay. So you have cost yourself. You are putting money into a cathedral. You don't have money. People advise the president. He simply didn't listen. He says, we'll build it. So people look at some of all of these, and say, you brought it upon yourself somewhat. And Martin says, in other countries around us, they are not suffering as much when we trace their problem to the Ukraine and COVID.
That last bit that you made, I think I've heard my brother Martin make that point. I think that he's just been overly subjective. I don't know the last time he crossed the border to go to Togo. I have relatives there in Togo. He's never. You need to go to Togo and see the level of development there. I mean, so that matter, let's not get into it. It's cheap populist political talk to say Togo. That there is no basis to compare Ghana and Togo. If you go to Togo and you hear him say that again, you tell him to stop it. Okay, the level of development in Togo, you compare that to Ghana, my brother probably knows Togo. So that matter, he should stop it. Now, the key issue you've made, which is the banking sector restructure. Now, you are faced with a choice. The NDC did the support that they're talking about, the alternative. You have many other options you can look at where they are throwing money at the problem. But the fundamental issue you had there was the sustainability of that program. The banks themselves were a shell. They didn't have the assets they say they had. Most of them, the assets they had were on paper. So that asset, if there was any day you were giving money to these banks, when it came to a point where depositors wanted their money, the banks did not have that. What they have is just paper money. And that money cannot, or that assets they claim, they don't have it. So what you needed to do long-term, if you are planning long-term to sustain and consolidate and build your banking system, which of course your economy runs on, you have to take a drastic measure. So the option the government took was one that I think in the long term will begin to see the benefit. Now, the cost expended on the restructure, it's not a loss cost, it's not a loss expenditure, which is why the government in its accounting showed those to be below the line, and the situation we've been talking about, to say that it shouldn't be added to the national debt because these are recoverable, right? They are recoverable expense. But you needed to make the decision at a time to ensure that your banking sector does not collapse. So any day, I would say that this is the right way to go.
How many years? You have not recovered $1 billion.
But you are the lawyer. You should
25 billion. You have not recovered $1 billion, $1 billion Ghana cedis.
Yes, you are the lawyer. It takes so long, right? The wheels of justice grind very slowly, but the process is ongoing. And these individuals who are caught up in this, essentially will come to a point where when judgment comes, and Ghanaians will have to get whatever the court decides comes, would go to pay the debt.
Right. Alex, what do you say? The people pouring on the street. I actually saw some NDC, former MP, Ras Mubarak, and a couple of other people there.
Can I start off by saying good morning to both of you, and obviously to your viewers and listeners as well. I despair, even though I have hope for my country, because the governments, I do not believe, still they haven't got it. They are actually playing down too much what is going on in the country at the moment. And yes, it is right to speak and try and paint a picture. But the big problem with the picture they are painting is that the starting point is lack of accepting that they have played a part in where we are. This, if you go to AA, you're an alcoholic, you have a drink problem. The first thing they say to you is you cannot join us if you don't get up and say, I am an alcoholic. You take responsibility first. Then you're allowed to join. If not, go away because you're not going to help us. You must first accept that I have a problem. And every time you listen to government, it's about the Russian-Ukraine war and it's about COVID. But they didn't do anything wrong in getting us where we are. And that is why I despair. Because if you do not accept you have a problem and that you actually took part, somebody could have offered you the drink before, somebody could have doused it, but you must now accept that that is what I am and I need to solve the problem. They are not prepared to do that. Then how do you bring everybody along? So you have this fundamental problem of lack of accountability by themselves. And you have even given narrations of what is going on. The government decided to take, I use local parlance, they played cha-cha with us and it didn't work. You had all these policies you decided to come and implement. And you looked at the revenue you had been left behind and decided that it's doable. So you created 6 new regions. That's not cheap.
I've heard many refer to that as part of the reason that the government should begin to, look back and admit that it's been spending what it didn't have.
You've mentioned the banking crisis. 9 billion hole, 25 billion bigger hole. And the problem is not yet solved. And there were other ways of dealing with it. Get rid of all the management, getting people to look at the management, build the banks up a bit, merge them, and then begin to... It's happened in Nigeria. So there were ways of doing it. They chose that path they have taken. We are still in that hole. And some have taken them to court. We don't even know the outcome of those court cases. But some of the judgments are not in favor of government at the moment. So there are issues as to even the way and manner in which they've gone about it. Then you have flagship projects, which are basically very high on consumption and not on production. So we have had free SHS in our constitution all this time. And another person decided, I'll do it gradual. You made it a flagship project, I'll do it big bang. No problem. It's a good policy, it's in our constitution, go ahead. But you didn't even cost it before you started. You were asked, even on BBC program, how much does it cost? You couldn't answer. But we are going to do. So you've done it. But why were you able to do all these things? Because you were the best, the luckiest government since Kwame Nkrumah, who walked into government and within 7 months, you have 2 oil wells gushing oil, and you're getting that revenue. It has never happened before in our history. So the total number of oil wells you inherit is 3. Apart from that, you're in a state where you can enter the euro market and borrow because of the state of the economy. So you go into that. That is not enough for you to plan with. You start collateralizing state-funded issues. So you've collateralized, I think, the Common Fund, or the District Assembly Common Fund. You've collateralized Get Fund to get more revenue. And the question is, what has this gone into at the moment that is giving production? Because if you have 100 factories, you can have 1 factory that will give you more revenue than all the 100 factories. So take Atwabu Gas. Look at the revenue that is giving us and the revenue we've saved. Look at KIA, Terminal 3. Look at the revenue that is giving us and that is bringing us back. So yes, we all have to spend. But you look at, you cut your coat according to your size. So for them to give this impression that, what is our problem, Samson? Simple terms. Our problem is our borrowing. Borrowing is a decision you take. Somebody took that decision. They took that decision. When they were in opposition, they accused us, quite rightly, that we are borrowing too fast, too quickly. It was done. In fact, it was used against us as being the basis for us even going to the IMF at that time. Things were not so bad then. So you've walked into a beautiful situation. And here we are now. And you are refusing to accept any responsibility whatsoever. It's COVID. This comparison of Togo, fine. You can do Togo. Togo is already relatively at the lower ebb. So let's take the macroeconomic figures, which they have. Take the macroeconomic figures of our neighboring countries. Then take the macroeconomic figures of the whole of Africa, so that we can say we are comparing like with like. I wouldn't even begin to argue about Togo. I'll be quiet. Because we are the West. in terms of the rates of depreciation?
We have followed the BBC, for example. They mention Ghana in the same breath as Sri Lanka and is it Ivory Coast? No, in one other country. So maybe we have company.
Everybody is being hit. That's why they can use COVID and to a certain extent Russia and Ukraine. I'll ask Samson, if we were going to use mortality rate as the basis for measuring COVID, can we even begin to compare ourselves with Europe, America, and China? The number of thousands of people who have died in those countries, you can't even begin to say that Africa was in the same vein with COVID. But find out how many African countries got the kind of financial help that Ghana got during COVID. And their macroeconomic position is nowhere close to where we are. We are way at the bottom. So that is where I think that the starting point is where government has an issue. Now, you talk about the president's speech, which we will come on to maybe further, but there are very important issues that draw from here. You're in a situation. Two things need to be done. You have to increase revenue, or subsequently, or simultaneously, you have to reduce expenditure so that you actually converge. Increase your revenue, reduce expenditure. You haven't yet told us, or the people who need to hear, the IMF, why? We are now being told that the IMF negotiations may stall, our budget coming out. Why? Because the difficult, tough decisions you must make, you are now shying away from again. Because you may have to touch projects which you deem are your flagship projects, and therefore they cannot be touched. We have to continue with development. And we are in a ditch, and we've got a spade, and we are digging deeper, creating a bigger hole without a ladder. Samson, the whole issue, government must look at its expenditure, cut it drastically. Government must look at revenue generation, and then government, but first and foremost, government must accept that they have brought us where we are, and it is augmented by the nature of the way they promised.
Right. So I was mentioning that the BBC, in their reporting for a greater part, they mentioned Ghana, and who they compare us with is Sri Lanka and Sierra Leone, yes. Which many people feel really embarrassed about, that we should not be getting to that. So what do you say? What the NanaMustGo demonstration, the Kumipreku Reloaded, is that how to go about it? The global info analytics has done some, snap survey, and its survey shows that 54% of the respondents, so representing Ghanaians, 54% of Ghanaians support that the president should step down. 6% of those they surveyed didn't have an opinion, and 40% disagree that the president should step down.
Well, 54% for a president who had such high ratings at one point in his tenure is an indictment of his tenure. And I do not believe that if certain things don't happen in the short term, that number will go down. It will definitely go up. And it also depends on when you ask that question, what people have in their mind, because actually it's a political question in disguise. So if you are a diehard MPP person, you would definitely say, no, the president shouldn't go. I am clear that a statement is being made to government. The demonstration is in two parts. One, resign, and two, you're in breach of Article 69 in other departments, especially on the economic side. Resignation is real, and you've already given the example of other jurisdictions where that is the norm. If you get to a certain point, the thing you do is resign. Our structure is not like that. The funny thing about the resignation is that even if Nana resigned today, the reason why you hear the demonstrators asking for Bawumia to go and the rest of the cabinet to go so that the speaker can take over is that if even Nana resigned, then you're actually saying Bawumia should come and take over. And people are just saying like with like, no point. So if the two don't go, then what's the point of anybody going? That's a possible argument that people are looking at.
So, but you support their demand?
Oh yes, I think that if we had a structure that would allow us simply to go for an election tomorrow, it should be activated.
If there's a resignation,
yes,
or there is death,
yes,
or such other circumstance as removal,
yes,
in the manner they are asking for from Articles 60 and then 69,
yes,
what the Constitution provides for is that the Speaker takes over,
yes,
and there must be elections within 3 months.
yes.
We don't have money. Elections are expensive.
We have chosen to make elections expensive to the extent that they are. But at least you will boost confidence. You will boost confidence which is needed at this time in the international market. People will now begin to take Ghana seriously as trying to solve its problems. And that is one of the main drivers of why people are asking for the resignation of the finance minister. It's not that people have a personal issue with him or whatever. No. From the moment the finance minister said, for 3, 4, 5 months, we are never going to IMF, to the extent that even top hierarchy members in the party were shouting from the rafters, we are not going. 4, 5 days before, he said, we are not going to the IMF. From the moment he said, I'm going to the IMF, that day, resignation.
That happens elsewhere, not in Ghana.
But it would have given the needed boost to the IMF to know that we are serious. At the moment, why is it? They cannot tell you what to do. They will tell you what your hole is. And they will expect you to be able to say, we are going to take hard measures.
Okay. Right. But Richard, as far as you are concerned, and we need to take a break here, as far as you are concerned, this is misplaced. They shouldn't be doing this.
The demonstration. The
demand of the demonstrators.
No. They don't have a sound basis for it. I mean, you read the law. Everything they're saying, if we look at the economic numbers, which I've taken time to work down here, comparing NDC and MPP in the last 16 years, and if you see, if this economic performance is any basis to want to say that get a president out of office, then we are looking at the NDC in their own time having to do that. But that's not what this is about. This is about, in the moment of crisis, try to solve the problem. You see, my brother was very crafty in saying that if we were to measure the impact of COVID in terms of how many people died, how about measure it in terms of the impact it's had on economies, which we are seeing globally? That's where the measurement is, right? So the question of the government having done anything untoward is not substantiated by the economic data. You look that even in 2017, when this government came, grew on average 7% up until 2019 when COVID happened. In 2020, economic growth went down to 0.51%. Now, immediately in 2021, you saw there was an increase in growth about 5.36%, right? And this year, 2022, first quarter returns about 3.8, second quarter about 4.8, which shows you that the economy is recovering. The issue we have now, Samson, if we are being very candid, all the economic professors who have come to talk, if they will be very candid to the facts, are global in nature, where our economy is largely import-driven, right? And so when you see the government's negotiations with the IMF, one of the key planks in there is trying to engineer a structural reform of our economy. That must be done. Way back when NDC Part 1 was there, NDC Part 2, we've been having this conversation in our country that the nature and structure of our economy is largely informal. That must be done. NDC was in power 8 years. That wasn't done. We're still here. We came here. In 2017, the purposes of trying to do that were looking toward digitalization. You see that agenda forcefully being pushed. You see today, the Ghana card situation has been done, and we're continuously going to make sure every Ghanaian has their card. It's toward structuring our economy. What is called the 10 numbers. Now you can trace, you can have every Ghanaian having their TIN number. Initially, before the Ghana card came, that was the drive. Now everybody's Ghana card will become their TIN number. So you are gradually bringing an envelope around the citizenry to see that at a glance, you can see everybody within the economic space, and you'll be able to purpose your tax instrument to be able to capture everyone.
What do you say to those who are now playing back Akufo-Addo's own words to him? In 2015, in December, he asked President Mahama to resign, that he had failed. He should resign. We also had, what's the name? In 2016, he himself has said, try me. And if I don't measure up, kick me out. He said it himself. Nobody asked him to say that.
I don't think I heard the president say, kick me out.
Yeah, but he said so. It is in his tweets. That's being said all over the place, yes. Okay. If you like, I'll just show you one. I'm looking at one here. Okay. And then you are familiar with AFAG, right? Yeah. Yes, Alliance for Accountable Governance, which I think was set up by the present Attorney General, Godfrey Dame. In 2014, also said, ask Mahama to resign or face their wrath. So people are telling you what Martin and his friends are doing is nothing new. And if anything at all, the president has asked for it before. Your groups have also done it before, except that they didn't hit the streets.
Yeah, and so something. So I have not contradicted that position. I didn't say that what they are doing is meaningless. I say they have a basis in democracy, which is part of the expression, but they don't have any sound basis in law to demand that. And when it was said during the NDC time, did he resign? People had a right to have their political expression. They've done that. So beyond that, that's what it must end to be. So, but the key thing for me, which is different in this case, is that there's an appearance, my brother Kpebu is going on a certain emotive tangent, and where I find it almost destabilizing in its conversation to incite the population against the person of the president, against the person of the finance minister, against the vice president. It is almost personal in his conversation.
Your own MPs, 95 of them, came out demanding that the finance minister be removed. That was not incitement.
But no, they made a democratic statement to say that, yes, it's our right, we feel that he must go, that's fine. But if you listen to Martin Kpebu, the conversation he's having is toxic. It's toxic. They made a statement and made their demand, we want this, and this is our response if it's not
They
done.
spoke about conflict of interest that Ken Ofori-Atta and his deputy find themselves in. Martin Kpebu talks about the conflict of interest. He speaks about data bank benefits. Is that what you say is incitement?
But Samson, you know Martin Kpebu is a lawyer, and a good one at that. If he has basis, why doesn't he take this to court? Let's examine that.
I think that would be material. Must everybody be going to court over everything they are displeased about?
No, I'm saying, yes, of course. A strong lawyer like him, right? I think there's this historic case that he's done to do with bail or something like that. He's
done many.
Many. But this one was critical. It was a very innocuous issue. He took it. Now he's established serious precedent for all of us. I'm saying that if he thought there was material evidence in this, to say the finance minister has conflicted himself in a manner that the law should frown on, why hasn't, because that is a much easier.
You're suggesting Akufo-Addo, who was known for doing a lot of human rights cases and so on, should have been going to court rather than going through a Kumi-Preku demonstration? I'm
not saying that. I'm saying in particular instance. You are putting me into a different situation. I'm talking particularly about what is before us, right? So lawyer Martin Kpebu, good lawyer, serious allegation. Why don't you take it to court?
He's allowed by the Constitution.
Yes, of course.
He's allowed by the Constitution.
He can do both. I have not denied
to free expression. So he can make.
I've not denied that. I've not denied that.
There are people who make the decision that I won't go to court because maybe I'm not comfortable that what decision I'll get to the court will even facilitate what I want.
But as a lawyer, you shouldn't say so because the law deals with evidence.
People are entitled.
But before he's a lawyer, he's a citizen of the country.
Hold on, no. So, Senior, I have not denied his democratic right to demonstrate.
Yes.
But I'm only saying that as a good lawyer that he is, he should make a rational decision of what gives him the best outcome he's seeking. Right? So if it is to say that the finance minister has corrupted himself by being in a situation of conflict of interest, that law can address that issue.
You know,
I would have a problem.
You know Ace Ankuma?
I do.
You know Occupy Ghana?
Exactly.
You know that as we speak, almost on a daily basis or weekly basis, they are writing letters to the president making demands on the Galamsey fight. They are writing letters. They are not going to court. Ace and Commerce law will sink a ship. But that's what he's doing.
So I'm saying that. So you're saying that. So that option they should ignore and then just go make noise. That I'm saying that it's an option. They'll choose to take it or not to take it. I'm saying it's good. He's taking a democratic route, which is fine. But if he feels strongly about it, he should also use the law.
Well,
my only question to you is that what he is doing does not stand for me in the Constitution to say that he has a basis in the Constitution. Because if he did, he would have gone to court.
Right, thank you very much. And we'll take a break. And as you know, the Kumi Preko Reloaded demonstration is actually now sort of warming up as they make us understand. And the hashtag is NanaMustGo. And they are continuing. They say that among their demands, they have listed a few things. I'll just read a couple of them to you before we go on a break. They have listed a number of things. They say that the president's mismanagement of the economy has brought Ghanaians severe hardship. They quote the currency, they quote fuel prices, astronomical, unprecedented. They say the president and his cronies are living ostentatiously and arrogantly and have no sense of sympathy for the ordinary citizen. They talk about Land Cruisers and motorcades that he continues to use, many of them even in the era of what you should see as austerity. 3, they say the president is supervising an incompetent team and refuses to make changes, even when his own MPs request that he should do so. He will not sack Oforiatta and he will not reshuffle. They state that. Number 4, the president is engaging in wasteful spending and misplaced priorities. They say he's spending on a cathedral. He's spent 34 million to rent private jets so he can bath in the skies. 5, the president is supervising growing insecurity and violence against citizens and the country. Then they mention a number of things, including his inability to protect us against Galamsey. And Occupy Ghana says, and other people say that the man who is associated with the president and his party, the chairman of the party in the Ashanti region, Chairman Wuntumi, whose company has been found to be doing illegal stuff in the forest, should be a best example to use to stop this. And finally, they say the president and his cronies have profited from our misfortune. They mention Galamsey, they mention Data Bank, among other issues. Now, their demands, they say that he and his vice should resign or they should be impeached and the speaker take over. Then there should be a convening of a transitional government of national unity. There should be a new constitution that favors the people and direct elections for MMDCEs, and among other things. And to lead Parliament to pass a law to make it mandatory for every appointee to appear before Shraj to justify their assets in accordance with Article 286. We take a break. When we return, tell us what you feel about the President's address on Sunday. Bright Simmons begins that discussion with us with a presentation. We'll be right back.